Since the early 1900s, cars have been essential for daily life, but their reliance on fossil fuels poses environmental challenges. While electric cars promise cleaner transportation, are they truly effective in reducing emissions? Let's explore the realities behind the electric car revolution and uncover a path towards a more sustainable future. Since the early 1900s, vehicles have been essential for us in this fast-paced world, taking us to work, home, and everywhere in between. They've become essential for most of us, but there's a catch. The majority of cars are run on gasoline, which isn't really good for the environment. Fortunately, electric cars, which are better than gasoline-powered cars, have come into play. In the last decade, the number of electric vehicles sold was much less than that of today, but now they're in high demand, making up a huge portion of the car sales globally. These cars are now being charged at charging stations everywhere, and they're also much less noisy than regular cars. Sounds great, right? Well, not everyone's convinced. Some people are still wondering whether electric cars are the most appropriate choice to be environmentally friendly. What about the possibility of another, better alternative? Are electric vehicles the ultimate solution? Tesla has been described as a game-changing car manufacturer, mainly because of its electric vehicles. They're considered cool, eco-friendly, and they almost look like a status symbol. But here's the thing. Whereas a lot of Tesla owners might feel that electric cars are guilt-free, the truth is that they aren't completely guilt-free. They emit much less gases than traditional cars, but their whole life cycle still has negative environmental impacts. On the one hand, the move towards more electric vehicles could in fact carry on detrimental practices like extracting resources from less developed countries. Electric cars are cleaner than gas cars overall, but they're not free from shortcomings. Although it is generally true that electric vehicles are cleaner than traditional cars, they do still have an emission footprint during their production, use, and charging. For example, a medium-sized electric car in Europe results in about 76 to 83 grams of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions for each kilometer it is driven over its entire life cycle. This is a drastic reduction compared to the 250 grams emitted by a similar-sized gas-powered cars. As of today in Europe, electric cars emit 66 to 69% less greenhouse gases than conventional ones throughout their lifespan. In America, it's 60% to 68%, and in China, it's 37% to 45%. The more the electricity production becomes cleaner, the better these numbers will look like. However, the positive figures are not the sole figures that are lurking behind these figures. The UK would need to provide an incredible amount of resources if it were to switch all vehicles to electric. Professor Michael Kelly from the University of Cambridge claims that this transition would require the UK to produce almost twice as much cobalt every year, 3/4 of all lithium carbonate available in the world, and more than half of all the copper produced in the globe, just for the UK alone. With an estimate of over 1.4 billion cars globally, the changeover to electric cars would mean that the countries that currently supply most of the precious metals and materials needed for electric cars, especially those in the underdeveloped regions, would face a lot of strain. The dependence on the global south to supply the electric vehicle industry with the resources to power the eco-luxury technology has created exploitative mining conditions where the global north enjoys emissions-free luxury technology, but people in the global south suffer. In other words, we are substituting our oil addiction with a new one, which is about the need for precious metals and raw materials. There is a possibility that in the future, the disputes may emerge for the sake of preserving the lithium deposits instead of the oil interests. Though electric cars do not emit less carbon dioxide than gas cars, they will not be sufficient to keep global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. Even the most optimistic projections indicate that only about 50% of the US vehicle fleet is likely to be electric by 2050, which is insufficient to meet the required level. EVs are just a temporary solution, but the sustainable and ethical transport system could hardly be imagined in the form of the present car-based system. It would involve embracing alternatives like public transportation, such as buses, and rethinking the design of our cities away from sprawling streets and highways. So, what should we do instead? In the movie Black Panther, produced by Marvel Studios, there is a scene that provides an image of clean and unhindered transportation. In the market that never sleeps, a futuristic tram gliding through the crowd, no cars on the road. This leads us to think beyond the electric cars and to think through what the transportation that is the most accessible and the most just is. The answer is in the air, in the form of free, electrified, and all-encompassing public transportation networks. Public transit is the one and only factor that can change the cities and the way we drive cars. Done in the right way, the technology can transport millions of people emitting less carbon, improving air quality, increasing mobility for low income, and cutting down on traffic congestion and crashes. Carless transportation. Tokyo sets a commendable example with its subway system, which accommodates over 8 million users every day. Such a feat is a big feat for a sprawling city like Tokyo, especially because electric subway systems are known to have a low carbon footprint per passenger compared to cars. It was found in the study that Los Angeles' light rail lines have much fewer carbon dioxide emissions per passenger mile over their lifetimes, with most of the emissions coming from the concrete used to construct them. The second study discovered that the diesel buses that were completely full released only 50 grams of carbon dioxide per mile per passenger. These figures are expected to rise with the electric grid becoming cleaner and more people switching to public transportation. For instance, a recent research in Trondheim, Norway displayed that diesel buses can be replaced by electric buses, and this can result in 52% reduction of emissions. A decision to have more of the public transportation electrified rather than having the sole reliance on electric cars could greatly reduce the energy and materials demands per person. Nevertheless, getting on public transport is not a straightforward process of selling your car and getting onto the first bus that comes. The hesitation to take public transport is due to the obstacles in place, and cost is one of the main ones. Metro and bus fares can be quite high, particularly for those who travel long distances every day. Some cities solve this problem by introducing a fare-free policy. When Tallinn, Estonia decided to make public transportation free, they witnessed a 14% increase in usage in just a year's time, which was particularly beneficial to the low-income individuals. But what is more? Just making public transport free is not the point. It must also be easy and comprehensive with reliable and frequent services, good paid jobs in transit, all-inclusive and coverage in all neighborhoods. This involves revisiting zoning regulations to embrace mixed use, constructing pedestrian and cycling-friendly infrastructure, as well as planning around the community. These transformations will forever change the way we will be living and moving around our cities, but since the present situation requires such solutions, they are worth the effort. Towards a carless world. Instead of betting on a sudden rise in electric car sales, we should be focused on the scenario of degrowth in transportation. The continued reliance on a huge number of new electric cars would just prolong colonialist exploitation and would not solve the fundamental problems that are the triggering factor of climate change. Such a surge of demand will strain our already stretched electrical grids, which will require even more renewable energy to meet the increased demand. If we are having difficulty in meeting the current electricity demand using renewable energy, think about the issues that will arise after replacing every car with an electric one. Degrowth in transportation is obviously a key issue to be addressed in order to eliminate both environmental and social injustice. The visualization of cities and towns where people are more important than cars can be considered a key factor in the emergence of a degrowth approach to transportation. This change will not happen overnight, and it requires a great deal of infrastructure changes, which will not encourage the use of cars and make the use of public transportation more attractive. Implementing initiatives like free bus fares is a step in the right direction, but ultimately, we need a well-connected transportation network that makes taking the bus or train not just convenient, but desirable. Our goal should be to imagine a world without cars, where cities are pedestrian-friendly, bike-friendly, and accessible to people with disabilities. In this world, rapid and electric public transportation is the primary mode of travel. Picture cities resembling Wakanda more than Los Angeles, with bustling streets and efficient public transit systems that prioritize the needs of people over automobiles. This vision of a carless world is not only sustainable, but also fosters a sense of community and well-being.